Hey everyone, welcome to the Recruitment Show. It's great to be a media partner of the DiveIn Festival again this year. I do a series of podcasts for them and I interview some wonderful folks that are involved in the DiveIn Festival, are in insurance, are in leadership roles, and I hear their perspectives on inclusion and diversity and just kind of get a sense check of where we are in the insurance market on these topics. So hope you enjoy the series. See you soon. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This is one of our special podcasts for the DiveIn Festival, which we've been supporting for quite a while now, which is awesome. And it's great to be joined by Jenifer Denby. Jenifer, thank you so much for joining me. Great to see you again.
Hi Lewis. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks so much. For those that don't know, you are the Global Head of Inclusion and Diversity at WTW. And you're involved also with DiveIn Festival as well, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So actually, I've been involved with DiveIn for about 8 years now, and I sit on our steerco, and yeah, quite heavily involved in some of the behind the scenes stuff too, and the direction of DiveIn. Just, I'm really proud of how the festival's grown and the reach that we've got.
Yeah, it's incredible. So it's been running for 8 years.
Yeah, I think so. I've certainly been in the I&D space for 8 years. So yeah, I've been involved with it for 8 years. I'm not sure the exact time. We should check that.
That's fine. I mean, if you think back these 8 years, it's just been like this space has just changed considerably. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the DiveIn Fest has been wonderful. It's really promoted inclusion and diversity and all of those things. But it's great to talk about, and doing podcasts like this as well is awesome. And it's also nice just to kind of get a little sense check, and certainly for you being at WTW, just kind of seeing and hearing, what you guys have been up to and the impact and so forth will be really interesting. We're just going to give us a little kind of overview, like how are you, like what's the state of play now? How are you finding things? What have you been doing in the space? And, we'd love to kind of hear that.
So I think, it's interesting. Let's take what you were just saying about how things have changed over 8 years since I've been in the space. And I think that, there's no doubt that inclusion and diversity is just an enterprise priority for every organization now. And, whereas 8 years ago, we might have been talking about just one type of diversity, we are, just seeing and understanding so much more around why diversity is important in our workplaces, the impact, having diversity and inclusion together. And also, obviously, linking into this year's theme of DiveIn, just that then knock-on impact of an inclusive and diverse, environment organization, the impact it's having on results, innovation, talent, attraction, questions from our stakeholders, shareholders, etc., clients. It's, who would have predicted, well, when I started my career in this space 8 years ago, that it would be where we are now.
Yeah, no, true. It's been incredible. And also, obviously, we had COVID as well, which I think also highlighted many things, but also was a catalyst for some really good stuff as well. It's been, I mean, that period, is incredible.
And I think what I saw with COVID is we had started to, I think we were slightly further ahead, probably thinking about well-being in the UK. And what COVID enabled us to do was, that conversation then went global quite quickly, and accelerated, I think, the work we've been doing around well-being. And I think the other thing that, obviously COVID was a challenge for lots of people, but I think there were a couple of silver linings, and one was around workplace flexibility and how we've just seen an acceleration in that being so much more mainstream now.
Yeah. The flexibility is interesting. There's also conversations around 4-day week. There's many companies, if you kind of look at the state of play, there's many companies that are wanting people back in to the office, 3 days, 4 days, or, Elon Musk style 24/7. And then the fully remote. So I'm saying that whole conversation is really interesting to watch play out. But I also think I was just thinking about this just a lot this last few weeks, and for me, almost flexibility isn't necessarily you have to come in or you can work at home. It's actually your leadership trusting you to do the things that they want you to do, and You don't have to ask permission to go and take your kid to the doctor, or, just like, treated like an adult, versus an adult kindergarten. And I think for me that feels like the kind of vibe and environment you want to be, working in.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's where I want to be working.
No, I love that. On the inclusion side as well, I mean, some of the other things some of the interesting points that I've been hearing and discussing recently is also there's this thing about bring your authentic self to work, and there's a lot of companies talk about it, they market it, bring your whole self to work, bring your authentic self to work, and things like that. And then there's also a kind of almost an unsaid thing of, do they really mean it, or do they mean bring your authentic self to work as long as you believe what I believe? Otherwise, please don't bring that part of you. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think it's slightly challenging because there are some times I think where I wouldn't want to bring my whole self to work. I want to bring my best self to work. But, I think there's a balance with all of these things, isn't there? And I think it comes back to if you're coming into an organization and basically covering a lot, then you're not able to perform at your best. And clearly that's what we mean when we're talking about authentic self, best self, etc., is to try and minimize that amount of covering that goes on. We know that people expend so much kind of emotional energy covering. But yeah, there are times where I don't think you want all of me. You just want the best of me.
Absolutely, for me too. But there's so much. But then the conversation, it almost also feels like people sometimes feel like they should bring their whole self. They feel like they should, but then not everyone. To your point, now, not everyone wants to. There's a lot of folks that they keep work and personal life quite separate, and they don't want to share, and they don't want to have to bring their whole self to work, and so I think there's a bit of work to be done on that, because everyone's different and there's no one size fits all. And I think, it works both ways. Obviously the environment needs to be conducive to all, to all types of people.
Exactly. And actually, I think this is what makes, actually inclusive leadership really quite hard, or good sort of management skills really hard is, your experience coming to work today might be very different from mine, probably is very different. And, as a manager, we've got to be able to appreciate that. We've got to be able to understand. We want to be in a position where we can reach out and check in with people and make sure that they're okay without prying. To your point about, not everyone wants to bring them their whole selves to work. But I remember if we go back to COVID and when George Floyd was killed, and we had lots of conversations with some of our colleagues. And I just remember, at that point, I think it really came home to me about people's different experiences, their lived experiences and coming to work. And, we need to be really careful that we don't think everyone's lived experience is the same as our own. And we've got to appreciate that. And we've got to be able to flex our style kind of continuously to make sure we've got that inclusive environment in our workplaces.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a very difficult position as you're a leader, or even like a middle manager, like kind of your first management role, and you've got this team, and it's really difficult because you have all different types of people. Some want to share, some don't. You want to be empathetic. You want to try and make sure that everyone's okay and stuff. And there's a lot of content around to help you do that, but it's difficult. I think the work from home thing was very interesting because pre-COVID, everyone was campaigning for flexible working, and then suddenly, we all got it. And what I found was, suddenly, you're in your home, you could see people's see people's homes, their fridges, or whatever. And I think people start to get a little bit more human in the workplace.
Yeah.
You got to know people a bit better.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of loved it, but not everyone wanted to show their home, did they?
No.
But
No.
I kind of like it when the cats sort of walk past, and it just feels it did sort of break it down. You could talk to someone about, oh, look, isn't your cat cute? Or your child, or whatever it might be. I kind of like that, and I think that over time people have got more comfortable with this is me, and this is, where I live, and this is my, my family. And on the flip side of that, of course, there's this blurring of work and home life that we're obviously all still kind of navigating. And I think for us in this space as, IND practitioners, it is about, well, how is this going to play out in terms of, if you're not in the office, are you going to lose out on opportunities, those kind of water cooler moments? I think we've got to be really quite intentional going forward about how we work, how we include people. What does remote inclusion look like? What does that sense of belonging look like if you've got people all in different places? So we're still, in my view, I think we're still really at the early days of sort of getting things right. But we know at WTW from talking to our colleagues, they really value the flexibility that we've been able to give them. And it's been a huge attraction for talent to our organisation as well.
And so what does that flexibility look like? Is that specifically in kind of like how often people come to the office? Or like, how does it look in practice?
Yeah, so we've got a global work styles program where you as an individual have a conversation with your manager about your pattern. Are you going to be hybrid, in office, or remote? And then, I'd say we're still working through the scenarios of when people go into the office, but we've not said to people, you've got to be in every Tuesday or every Wednesday. What we have said is, there's, a big opportunity to get people together. And we know that, exciting things happen when we all come together. So let's make sure we come together for the right things and not just, trekking into London, in my case, and being on Teams calls all day. Let's go in and really make the most of that in-person time. And I think, as well, if our clients want to see us, and obviously want to make sure that people are there for them. So it's about that kind of right balance. But no, we haven't been an organisation that says we want everyone in on a particular day. I think actually what's happened there in practice is nobody wants to go into an empty office either. So we do sort of have those kind of hub days of, I know in HR, if I go into the office on a Wednesday or a Thursday, there's definitely going to be people there.
Right.
I want to go and see people.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because there is the conversation online and on social media is very much around companies should be flexible and all of the really good stuff. But there's also a point that a lot of people actually wants to come in to an office. And to your point, it's only worth coming in if other people are coming in, And actually also a lot of young folks, I mean, the conversation often is, they don't want to come in and they want to work from home. But actually it's just a lot do, they want to learn from someone like this. You learn so much from sitting next to your boss, just hearing and seeing how they behave and stuff. And also just to the personal side, so many people meet partners at work and like make really good friends at work. And, like I speak to so many people like, I met my husband or wife at work and we work together and I'm a friend of a friend and stuff like that. And now if you don't have that, there's also that kind of social element to it because work's the thing we do most in our day, right?
Yeah. I'm one of those people. I met my husband at work many moons ago.
There we go.
So actually, but also when I think back to think back to when I was a young person, I did want to be in the office. It was sociable. We went for Thursday night drinks and all of those great things that happen. And certainly for us at WTW, it is about, how do we get this right with this flexibility where we've got, if you think about our early careers folks that join us, how do we make sure there's that right mix of in-office interaction, but the right people being in the office? I think it can be easier if you're more experienced in your role and you've got those connections already to think, I can just work from home. That's fine. But if you don't go to the office, how do you impart some of that knowledge on just people around you? And I know when I go into the office now, I try not to have like a back-to-back day. I want to have some breaks so that if I see someone in the lift in the morning, I haven't seen you in ages. Can we have coffee? Can we chat? Other people you can just sort of see and say, I've got a quick question for you. And it can be really productive.
How can we overcome some of those things? Because you're right, some of the conversations, it's funny in insurance, like before, around COVID, a lot of the more seasoned folks were like, this will never work, Lewis. we have to be, in the city, and that's how business is done. And, we walk around and stuff like that. And then, I spoke to some of those folks maybe 6-7 months in, only over video, because, suddenly video works great now. And then I'm not really sure if I'm going to be in that much anymore. I'm like, really? And these folks were like just stalwart, so it's really funny how it evolved. But now you're right. You have some folks where these are the people that people want to learn from, but actually they're thinking a little bit more maybe about their own life or whatever, work-life balance or however you want to call it. And actually for them, they're better off. Maybe they're coming 1 day a week or not at all. How can we, I think the challenge is how can we kind of marry this up to, there's people that want to learn, and how can we get these other folks back and just make it a real good learning experience for people?
Well, I think in my view, we've got to view this as, we are still experimenting. So I don't think it's helpful to have a policy that says you've got to do this. I think we've got to involve people and say, this is changing for everybody. Let's all work together to find the best solution. So whether that's in a team kind of saying, okay, we're going to have a hub day in the office on a particular day and we're going to bring people in for that, or it's about being really clear with people about different scenarios and how best to sort of use your time. And I think we've got to be really intentional. And actually, one of the things I find the hardest is when you've got half the group, if you're in a big meeting, half the group in the room and everyone else on video. If you've got everyone on video, I think people have got quite disciplined in terms of putting your hand up, and it's very respectful. When you've got half the people in the room, it's suddenly like you lose that. And we kind of got to remind ourselves and call ourselves out and say, look, actually, we need to have some discipline around this to make sure that everybody feels they can be heard, can put their physical, virtual hand up, be included in the conversation. And I think we've all got a responsibility, I think, to be saying, oh, we haven't heard from you. Did you want to contribute? And that's something we're kind of still practicing.
Yeah. Someone needs to, to run the meetings properly, because they're weird meetings when some of you are in, some of you are on video. Because you can share a private joke or a little look or a nudge or I don't know, something, just like some of these non-verbal cues. But then you could be, on the video missing all of this kind of stuff. Can't quite hear. The internet's a little bit bad. You've missed everything. So they're weird. They're weird kind of hybridy. Because hybrid's a bit of a challenging one. Because if you look at the kind of through a lens of people feeling included and stuff, it's so easy not to in those scenarios. Whereas if everyone's in or everyone's out, everyone's the same, Because also to your point, a lot of folks are like a bit worried about whether they'll miss out on that promotion. Their colleague sits next to their boss every day. They're like 2-3 hours commute. They might come in once a week, once every 2 weeks. Are they going to miss out? I don't know. Maybe not. There's obviously, a lot of policies in place to minimize all of that stuff, but we're human,
Yeah. And I think we've got to, we've got to look at it with the advantages. So, we've got a much bigger pool of talent if we're not being restricted that you've got to come into an office on a certain day or for certain days. So that's a great thing. And then I think it is about sort of practicing and learning new skills around, remote inclusion, bias, how that sort of creeps in around, people's different working styles, how we reward people, how we dish out those kind of stretch opportunities to people that really help them grow and develop. We've got to be just really intentional about that. But I think I'm a big believer that we can get there. But at the moment, I am just slightly worried about the people that may stereotypically kind of choose to stay working from home because it's easier, be that if you've got a disability or you're a carer, for example. How's that going to shake out in a few years' time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's, it's tough because there's no one size fits all. And as a company, you want to be able to, a company's made up of people and you want the best folks. You want to be able to attract and retain the best available people. And I think part of this is, is thinking through, well, how can I do that? And And so it's just kind of having a conversation, I think, and understanding what people want and being able to create something that works for people. So, whether it's someone that for whatever reason they need to be at home 5 days a week and can't come in, but wow, what an amazing person they are, and like just the best of their job, and you need them in your team, but you want them to feel part of the team and included. And it's just thinking through how you do that versus someone that's like, I really want to be in the office 5 days a week. Like, I get depressed at home. I don't want to stay at home. I want to come. I want to learn from you, Jenifer. I want to sit next to you. How often you? So there's so many different moving parts. But I think that the companies that I see winning, and by winning I mean being able to attract the best and keep the best, are the ones that just are listening to their employees, and just thinking it through. And it is tough because on the other the other side of the conversation is a company pays your salary, and there isn't also an argument for, well, look, as a company, and let's use Elon Musk as another example because it's quite a stark contrast, isn't it? Like, so come in 5 days a week. Now, if you market that up front and you communicate and you're open and honest with your culture, what the vibe is, and all of that stuff, then you're going to attract people that wants to work in your environment. I think that's also worth noting, because you always see folks, they join somewhere, it doesn't work out, and you kind of look at why it's not worked out, and there's something that's not being communicated. There was something that was marketed wrong. The culture wasn't quite as they described, and that doesn't help anyone in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's important to do that, I think. What else are you guys seeing, doing? Maybe on the hiring front, it'll be interesting to hear. Are candidates expressly asking for flexibility and things like that? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I haven't hired anyone into my team recently, but yeah, I know from talking to our recruitment folks that we believe at WTW our approach to flexibility is helping us attract top talent into the organization. So they're definitely asking about that flexibility, and I think as well, I also hear, and I hear this not just from candidates, but we hear it from our clients as well. People are really interested in what we're doing around inclusion and diversity. We love being able to share with people how we're involved in DiveIn and other things. I just think people, maybe it comes back to your point around culture. Most people are really interested in who they're going to work with, as well as the work they're going to do, as well as the salary and the benefits they're going to be paid. But I think it's sometimes, it feels to me that people are sort of more interested now in what an organization's like. I think that they know they've got choice and they're going to spend a lot of time doing this. So it's not just a numbers game, in my view.
No, 100%. 100%. I mean,
I was about to say, you're the expert, Lewis, in this. So really, I should have asked you that question.
Well, I don't know about expert, but I try. But you're right. I mean, like, I speak with, thousands of people a year and stuff. And so yeah, you have this kind of saying of like, people don't leave jobs, they leave people, and it's cheesy and whatever, but it's so true. It's very rarely money that's the reason why someone's looking to move. It's the team, the culture, the leader. There's a great stat I heard, which kind of like, it's an interesting one. I went to a talk and one of the partners from McKinsey was presenting, and they do these wonderful surveys and stuff, and they surveyed employees and they asked them, what's the biggest cause of stress in your job? 75% said their leader, their direct line manager, was the biggest cause of stress in their job, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, you can kind of interpret that in a bunch of different ways, because actually, some stress is not a bad thing. But that was just incredible. I wonder if 75% of line managers realize that they're the biggest cause of stress for their employees. But it emphasizes the point nicely that it's all about people, and in insurance broking, in insurance, whatever it is, like, the job's the job, right? Like it's similar, if not the same, wherever you go, with some nuance and stuff. But what's the real difference? And it's the group of people you're working with, the culture. I always find as well, like, people want to feel part of something, not just a participant in something, and then they just want to feel included. They want to feel part of the team, the family, however you want to do it. And I think it's a real important thing, to be working on.
And I'm not that surprised by that statistic. I think I've heard similar things, and it does come back to like the importance of your managerial skills and how much we're all investing in that. I think in the past, certainly like earlier in my career, it was almost like a given. You got promoted, you just became this great manager. And I was like, I don't think it's that easy actually to be a good manager, especially when I think particularly around kind of inclusive leadership and those skills. And we touched on some of them earlier. I think it's really hard and we have to practice that.
It's super hard because I was talking about this with someone the other day, because if you think about like your kind of life journey, it's like you go to school and it's all personal performance, right? Like you do well at exams, it's on you. Maybe you do team sports, you get a bit of, like kind of team stuff and maybe some leadership. But then, you do well at university. If you go to university, you get a job. Then mostly early jobs are individual contributor roles. So again, it's on you. And then becoming a manager, you suddenly move from I to we, which is really hard. And very few people get decent training and development for it. And suddenly, actually, the job has changed from like you doing great to making sure your team do good and being there for people and helping them on. It sounds small, but it's a massive change and really hard to get your head around.
Yeah. And I often think it's not really something you just learn on a course, is it? You have to see it. I can just think of some really good role models I've had in my career that have helped kind of shape some of the things I've done. But I think it's about having an environment where sometimes you're going to make some mistakes as well, and how you recover from that and what you do and how you learn from them.
Yeah. No, it's hugely important. To that point of like, it's okay to fail or to fall down and stuff. I really like Simon Sinek. And if you know Simon Sinek, he does a lot of talks and stuff. He's like the kind of the optimism guy, and he was on the Diary of the CEO podcast. Simon Bartlett, I think, is the guy, and he recounts a great story. And he has this book called like Why, and he's got it's like kind of why you do, what you do, and how you do it, whatever. And so he'd done this Why talk many times, and he was doing it in front of a group of business people. And he got to a point in the talk where he'd done hundreds of times, he just forgot what he was going to say, completely forgot. And then he said, like, the feeling of, panic, anxiety, you can imagine just sweating and stuff. And there's no one said anything. And they were all waiting for him to find his regain his place and then continue the talk. So maybe after a minute, he said, like, he found his place and he was all flustered and he carried on. And then a year later, he did it in front of US Army audience, like, and again, he's doing the same talk, and he just forgot. Again, he forgot what he was going to say. And the panic set in, and then there was some general at the back of the room said, like, carry on, we're with you, and so the kind of the analogy that was great, because like the army folks were like with him. He fell, he was in the dirt, he was like embarrassed and whatever, but he said, look, don't worry, we'll wait for, we're there with you, to whereas the business folks, they were like, well, he fell, let's wait for him to pick himself up, And so I think, relating that to like inclusion and work and stuff is like, you want to work in an environment with people that like will pick you up. We're not waiting for you to fail. And there's many, many cultures and many companies described in that way, where it's kind of waiting for you to fail. No one's really there to help you. And it's not the kind of place that people want to stay at, and they don't. But if you find a place where they're there with you, and I, for my living, I try and poach people from companies, right? And it's way harder to poach people in an environment like that who are really happy, because that's what you want. You just want to work in that kind of place,
And I think you've just done a really good job of describing kind of belonging in an organization, and how, if you do feel that you belong there, and then you can turn up and be yourself. And, we know that when you're in that kind of inclusive environment and you can, your voice is heard and you can put forward ideas, might be good ideas, might be bad ideas, but someone's going to listen to them. Someone's going to respect you for the good and the bad ideas. And, that's what I think makes us all really good at what we do when we've got that kind of net around us, of inclusion, of belonging.
Yeah, it's hard. How can you like measure it or check? Because the other thing is, I speak with a lot of leaders and they describe the culture to me, and then I speak with their team and they describe the culture to me, and it's often like, here and here. How can you kind of get is there like a few things you can do to kind of get a sense check as to kind of like where are we at?
Yeah, and I'll tell you a couple of things that we do about how we measure inclusion within WTW, but also I think when you've got an organization like ours of 45,000 people in 120 plus countries, we don't have one culture. That would just, and we're not striving, I think, for one culture either. So I think that's something really important to bear in mind. And culture's changing all of the time as well. And the impact that one person, you said earlier about that statistic with people and their leaders, that culture can change almost overnight when you change the people.
Yeah.
But coming back and answering your question, so yeah, we measure inclusion, if you like, through our engagement surveys. We've got an inclusion index in there. Also through like the questions that we were asking constantly with our sort of overall listening strategy. So be that, in exit surveys or just when we are listening to people. So I know my team spent a lot of time with our inclusion networks. That's what we call our ERGs within WTW. We're meeting with those leaders on a monthly basis. Obviously, we're sharing information with them, we're gathering ideas, but we're listening. And that's really important, I think, to listen, to have your finger on the pulse, but also, those more formal mechanisms of kind of being able to measure inclusion through, engagement surveys.
Yeah, no, I like that. I really like that. I think it always boils down to just speaking with people and listening, right? Yeah, then you can really start to understand because there's, and I like that. And it's so simple, and there's so many tools you're able to do it with, video or coffee or or the phone, but just listening and speaking. I think it's just a great thing to, to be able to do.
And I think you want it, but you've almost got to have like the culture as well to support the listening, so that people know that you're visible as any kind of leader, that people can approach you and tell you what they're thinking, and people need to know how to give feedback in the right way as well, because nobody wants to listen to moaning Minnie the whole time. We've got to be kind of constructive when things aren't going well, and and I think people have a role to play in coming up with the solutions as well. You've got to. It's all like this cycle, isn't it? Of everything's got to be flowing together. Because if you don't have the right culture in the first place, people aren't going to feel empowered to speak up and say what they think.
Yeah. And there's also like a little bit of an elephant in the room, so to speak, around, people are quite scared to have some of these difficult conversations for fear of being cancelled. There's like a lot of kind of this undertone of, people are quite offended by things nowadays. And I think the knock-on effect is that actually people are a little bit nervous to have some of these, let's say whatever there might be, personal or difficult conversations with people. And I think we need to get away from that. I think we need to be able to speak with people and understand and listen. That needs to be, that's important. That needs to be there, I think. Otherwise we're going to run into some big problems later down the line, I think.
And I just read this great book by Kenji Yoshino, and it's called, it's either called Do the Right Thing or Say the Right Thing. And it's exactly on that point. And I loved it because, the premise of the book is, how do we find a way to be kind of respectful in what we're saying or questions that we ask? And, can we all kind of agree that in the most part, people, when they're speaking up and saying things, aren't doing it with a bad intention? I know, there are obviously some cases where people are, but, on the whole, so how can we all sort of have that more supportive environment that we are all learning, and we don't want people to be afraid of asking the questions or having the tough conversations, because we won't move forward if we all just stay being too afraid to say, there is, I think, this real fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing that we need to get past.
Yeah. It's hard because so much of the last few years has been about, a lot of like doing the right thing or saying the right thing. And a lot of the stuff online, again, is to that point. And so you have a whole raft of folks that, when engaged in an online conversation about these things for fear of being cancelled. And then when it comes to a conversation in a company, again, very, it's like, you've got to be very, the feeling is, I think generally, is, to be careful, not to say the wrong thing for fear of offending. And so I'd like to see, like the culture should be, because, kind of almost winding back to our original, kind of where we started. It's like, you want to bring your authentic self to work. Like, you want to be able to come to work and not be afraid to ask, well, I didn't quite understand that. Can you, what's this? Or what are your thoughts on this? Or even just asking a question, which actually someone say, I'm a little bit offended about that. But the person who might be a bit offended also needs to have the kind of humility, or whatever you want to call it, to be like, it's cool. They didn't know. Why should I be offended by that? Absolutely. Let's have the conversation. Let me explain my position, and you can have dialogue. So I'd like to see us get there. That's what, for me, that's what, we're trying to work towards in our company, is just, you can speak to people, you can have conversations and all of those things. I'd like to see us work more on that.
And I think, when we think back to, DiveIn in this year's theme about innovation, it's that ability to kind of speak up and challenge the way things have been done. And, you need a culture that sort of supports that as well, to say, well, just because we've done it that way, should we do it this way? But you need to be able to feel safe that you can put your hand up and challenge things, whatever level you are in an organization, and there's a mechanism kind of there for you and support to do that. And I think especially, the world of insurance is changing so much, and there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to be entrepreneurs in the workplace and come up with great solutions within this industry. And we got to have the culture to kind of support the talent that are going to help us do that.
100%. And also, to attract talent from other industries, attract the best available people to come and work in the industry. Again, a lot of this, the culture, the people stuff, these things that we've talked about will go a long way to attract people into the industry. And also, I think the industry right now, I've listened to a bunch of different insurance CEOs, different talks recently. It's probably like one of the best moments. And they were saying it's maybe like the best time in insurance in 50 years or something, and like, it's a good moment for the insurance sector. And I think there's a lot of innovation going on. And I think we need to keep moving forward and keep having these conversations, and, working hard at, making the industry a place that people want to work, it's a good thing to aim for.
Yeah.
Jenifer, we've done almost 40 minutes. Almost 40 minutes now. Love that. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything else you wanna add? I think we've covered a lot.
Well, I guess obviously we can't go without just giving a final plug to DiveIn, and people can register. I think it's Tuesday, the 5th of September. And for me, as I said at the beginning, I've been involved in the festival for 8 years. I've seen it really grow and develop. The range of, events on offer is phenomenal. And if I had one thing to say to people that are listening, it's like, bring someone along with you. I think for us, that's the challenge, is getting new people coming along to the festival, new people involved in the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And there's in-person events, there's online events. I mean, it's everything.
And and you're not restricted by the country that you're in. I'm really excited about, there's an event in the US all around innovation and inclusion. We've got some of the chief innovation officers from some of the biggest insurance companies, and I'm really excited to dial into that, as well as go to some hybrid events, on the doorstep in London. So it's and that's what actually, and just to go back to kind of COVID, that's what COVID did for us, is they made this festival so much more accessible.
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. And also I love the global aspect of it because, inclusion and diversity, I mean, it's a conversation that people are having in every single country. And once you look into this real subtle and some non-subtle nuances, from country, region, and it's really fascinating to get a global view on these things. I think it's great. And it's, love all these events. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you again, and keep up all the good work. And I'll see you at one of the DiveIn events, I'm sure.
Definitely. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Lewis.
Pleasure. See ya. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe in all the usual places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you like to watch or listen to a podcast. Any comments or feedback, please drop us a DM. If you've got anything that you want us to discuss, again, feel free to get in